hopefully we're coming through loud and clear to you out there. My name is Melissa.
And I'm Brandon.
And we are here with the Draper Museum Raptor Experience at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West in Cody, Wyoming. And today we have a really fun and different live presentation for you. We're going to try something different today. And we are going to play a game that actually was really fun at Brandon's wedding. And I'm going to let Brandon explain to you what this game really is.
And I couldn't find an actual name aside from the wedding game. But basically the bride and groom would take off each other's shoes, and the bride would have one of her shoes and one of the groom's shoes and vice versa. And they would be back to back. And basically someone would moderate and ask questions, and whoever was more likely to be, for example, the one to snore the loudest, the person who they thought would snore the loudest would be raising that particular shoe. So we're going to kind of adapt this to which bird is more likely to do whatever. And so we've actually asked several staff members and some volunteers to give us questions, so we have no idea what we're going to be asked. And we have to come up with an answer out of the two birds that we are sharing with you today. We have Salem, the American kestrel, who Melissa is working with, and I'm working with the lovely Miss Monte, our eastern screech-owl. And so we get to decide which one of these two birds is more likely to answer the particular question.
Yeah. And so please, if you have questions, add them on there. We have our amazing boss standing by with the questions that have already been submitted, but he's also going to try to watch the screen so he can let us know what your questions are. And we have it set up so Brandon and I can't see each other, and we're going to find out which of us is going to get more of these right. So, Brandon, are you ready over there?
I think so. How about you?
I think so. All right, Nathan, I think we're ready for our first question.
All right, your first question. Let me tell you, we have a very broad assortment of questions for you both today. So we're going to start off with, who has a stronger grip? All right, excellent. Which species has a more colorful male? All right, so
as
we've got
rouses and shows off his colorfulness.
some agreement
What do you
so far.
mean? I was talking about Monte.
Who weighs the most? Excellent. All right. 3 for 3.
I should just throw out there, Brandon, what does she weigh?
Let's see. We last weighed her. She was, oh gosh, 108. No, that was normally she weighs 185 grams.
That's what I was going to say. Would be 185.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And by the way, Salem typically weighs about 110 grams, so much less.
All right. And this is an interesting question. Who preens the most?
Ooh, who preens the most?
Wow. I'm impressed.
Do we agree?
You agree so
Yeah.
far.
I've never seen either of them preen, but he rouses a lot, so I'm assuming.
I would expect a falcon to be more feather-oriented than an
Yeah.
owl. I mean, owls have all day, so I guess technically they would preen a lot, but falcons are more on the go.
Speaking of being on the go, who can fly the fastest? All right. You two have worked together for far too long.
Maybe we got birds that are so different it's easy so far.
Which bird takes advantage of ultraviolet light in a mouse's urine to track it?
We talk about that one all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. That's one of your amazing facts.
All right. Who is better at using their beak?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Oh, some
We disagree?
disagreement. So since this is our first
Oh.
agreement, our first disagreement, Brandon, why do you say Monty?
Well, mostly because I had to pick her up today. I mean, now that I think about it, they both probably are going to use their beak about equally, now that I think about it. But I would say Monty just because every time that we pick her up, not every time I should say, but she is kind of sleepy because it is the middle of the day. And so she's kind of like that grumpy toddler when you wake her up. And she kind of tries to eat my finger when I'm trying to tie on to the glove sometimes. So that would be my reasoning.
All right.
Okay.
Melissa.
See, And I was thinking, it's a tool for each of them. They tear apart their meals, but because the falcon has a toenail tooth, an extra notch to help them snap some vertebrae and sever spines. That's what but then I also just kind of came up with a new one. But you know what? I was going to say the owl has special feathers that cover her beak. So she but that's not her beak, that's her feathers. So never mind. My bird wins.
Okay. So between the two, who has been with the center the longest?
Birds, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Either way.
Center the longest.
All right. Agreement. When did Salem join the center?
Salem arrived on December 1st of 2013.
Excellent.
He's been here 6 years.
Yeah, pretty good. And then why don't you tell them when Monte? Why didn't you tell them when Monte arrived?
Monte arrived in August of 16.
Yeah.
Didn't think about that.
Excellent. All right. So these have been a lot of clear answers so far.
Uh-oh.
Whose call or vocalization strikes more fear into their victims' hearts?
Oh, wow.
Okay,
That's-
agreement.
Okay.
Agreement.
Yeah.
So what is your reasoning on that one?
Well, I'm thinking that, Monty would do everything she can to never be heard by her victims. And not that a kestrel would want to be heard, but they're a lot more vocal. And they have a pretty awesome killy scream that they do.
And the reason why I said I agreed with you was when he does that call, it's always very angry.
Yeah.
Not to anthropomorphize, but it's very aggressive.
Yeah, it does
In
seem
the
that
call.
way. Okay, Steve.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to switch from some of our existing questions because we've got some questions
Awesome.
from our virtual audience.
Good deal.
Let's see who has the better eyesight.
Are there conditions with that at all?
No conditions whatsoever. Okay, Melissa's not sure. So what conditions might change an answer?
The availability of light, for one.
Yeah.
If it is very dark or dim, low light levels, this girl is going to have a lot better light because she can see better in low light levels. If it's in broad daylight, the kestrel is going to be able to see a lot better, and kind of like we talked about, he can see in the ultraviolet light spectrum, she cannot. So that's kind of the main thing that I would go with.
Yeah, and that would be, I concur.
Excellent. All right. So another question from our live viewers. Who has the fastest heart rate? All right. Agreement. Excellent.
As you can see, everything about this guy is really amped up right now. He's a little nervous. He hasn't been handled a whole lot since we haven't been open and doing programs, and he's never been in this room. So he's a little on the nervous and twitchy side, so it's okay, Salem.
All right. Well, and Salem seems to be turning his head a lot. Who can turn their head around the farthest? Excellent. How far?
So a kestrel, they can turn their head, like most birds can turn their heads a little over 180 degrees each direction. Monte and the owls can go 270 degrees each direction. So.
All right. And another one from our virtual audience.
Excellent.
Which one thinks they are the best ambassador?
Oh, okay. So, which of them thinks they're the best ambassador?
Do you have an answer? Because I don't.
Well, Monty's an owl. She doesn't want to be popular.
Yeah,
And Salem
he's
would
been here longer, so
Yeah.
he's the more I would say Salem.
probably.
I would go with
And
him.
I can see Falcon. I mean, we're anthropomorphizing, but I can
It's-
see Falcons tend to have kind of a cool dude attitude. Yes.
Excellent. All right.
Tough
Let's
one.
see. Who flies faster? All right. An agreement. Who is a more successful hunter? All right, some agreement on that one.
No offense.
Let's see.
Yeah, none of them. Right?
Okay, so
They
let's
get room
switch
service.
back to a very specific question.
Oh boy.
Which bird kidnaps a species of blind snake, keeps them alive, and uses them to clean her nest of unwanted insects?
That is very specific, yes.
Who is a kidnapper?
Yeah.
Excellent.
They could both just be kidnappers, but
Yeah.
good thing
Do you want to elaborate on that one at all?
No.
There was a lot of information in that
That was a lot
question.
of really good information right there.
That pretty much sums it
yeah,
up.
that did it.
All right, who has the better courtship display?
I don't know that either of them's really much
Yeah,
of a
there's-
display, but
There's not a lot of displaying, it's more vocals.
yeah, kestrels are amorous. Let's just say they're very amorous in springtime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably them, but
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Which one is easier to train? Okay, an agreement there. Excellent. Which bird has bigger eyes relative to its body size?
Look at them eyeballs.
Excellent. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, it's they both have really big eyes for the size of their head, but the best comparison you can do is on an owl. If they had a human-sized skull, their eyeballs would be about the size of softballs, and on a falcon, it would probably be more like a tennis ball size.
Excellent. Who takes the longest getting ready for an evening out on the town?
Ooh.
Well, if it's evening, she's probably ready. Oh,
Excellent. All right.
I'm thinking he's a dandy.
Yeah. Monty's just kind of the get out of bed and
Yeah,
go
she's a
outside.
low maintenance girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which bird is more likely to hit a distant target while eliminating waste?
Should we elaborate on that? Oh, is Brandon not decided yet?
He's not
No,
decided
no,
yet.
I'm trying to process that question. So, okay, I think I know where you're going with this, but we'll go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was gonna say birds do poop differently, and owls tend to go straight down when they poop, and hawks and eagles and falcons, not as much in falcons, but still a little bit. They tend to do what is called slicing, where they basically project it out and away. Although owl babies do that too, they back up to the edge of the nest and poop over, so it's not all in their nest. But in general, I would say a falcon would, with a slice, would go a little further.
I agree.
Excellent. All right. Who's going to make a better fisherman? Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of being a fisherman, who makes the biggest mess when they eat? Okay.
Hands down.
Brandon had to think about that one.
No. I thought of all the days I had to clean up after him. And,
There's
yeah,
there's
he flings it everywhere.
pieces flung everywhere every day.
All right. Who migrates the farthest? Okay. Who will eat almost anything? Okay. Agreement on that one. Which bird stalks farmers during harvest to seize an easy meal?
Yeah.
All right. Who is the oldest? How old is Salem?
Salem, we're not 100% sure because he was an adult when he suffered an injury to his eye. But we think that he's somewhere between 9 and 14 years old, somewhere in that range. Monty, we know, is just 3 years old.
Okay, excellent. Which bird is better used in falconry?
Owls are not good falconry
Good
birds.
falcons.
Excellent. Oh, this one, I look forward to the answer on this one.
Oh no.
Who is the best gift giver?
Yeah.
Among their own species or to others?
I guess between the two, between Monte and Salem.
Oh, between them individually?
Yeah.
Excellent. That was not an agreement.
Monty is always giving gifts all the time.
Okay.
On the floor.
Well.
On the floor and down the back of the glove.
Well, that's true.
That's owl gifting.
But Salem does that plus all of the food that he splatters everywhere for us.
Yeah, but it's not intended. He
And
just...
and the gift of smiles.
Oh, well,
Not
yeah.
that Monty doesn't do that too. So.
This is her smiling face. What does that mean?
Well, speaking of, whose castings are the most fun to look at?
Oh, that's a tough one, I think. Because they're about the same size. But I would go with Monty.
Okay, excellent. There was an
Why did you
agreement there.
finally come to that decision?
Well, because he has a lot more, well, no, because she has more variety in her diet, but I don't know.
I was just thinking she has bones and he doesn't.
Yeah, I guess that would make it a little more exciting, yeah. I totally spaced on that one. My bad.
It's been a long week.
Yeah.
All right.
They have a little more stomach acid in their digestive tract, so they don't process, or they do process the bones of the animals they've ingested. Owls, their stomach acid isn't nearly as acidic, so they're more likely to have bones in those castings.
Excellent. All right, here's a good one. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. Which bird is more likely to order an Italian beef dipped with extra hot giardiniera?
Yeah, I don't think anyone is going to go for that one. They probably just stare at it.
I can see Salem ordering it as a joke.
Yeah, I could see. Well, I mean, if he's the one that's more likely to go out on the town,
Yeah.
I think he would go for
There,
that.
there we go.
I think Salem
Let's go
would
with
do that,
Salem.
Okay, excellent. Well, we've got a fun question from our virtual audience.
Okay.
Mrs. Hinckley's class would like to know where each bird came from.
Ah, all right. Well, Salem was found near Salem, Utah, and he came to us from Second Chance Wildlife Rehabilitation in Price, Utah. They took care of him after he had damage to his right eye. And Monty over here, she was found on the side of the road near Roberts, Montana. That's where she gets her name, and where Salem gets his name is from being near Salem, Utah. So Salem's from Utah, and Monty is from Montana. And Monty was rehabbed right here in Cody at our local rehabber, Ironside Bird Rescue. Hi, Mrs. Hinckley's class.
Let's see, who lives in more varied locations?
Wow.
Okay, there was an agreement, but why?
Okay. Well, it's hard because you think of screech-owls, they're forest birds, so, and then kestrels are plains open space birds. So they both have relatively specific habitats, but they're both very adaptable too. Both of these would live right in the middle of a town. So I think Salem would be a little more adventurous. A kestrel would be more likely, I think, to be right on that forest edge, right out in the open, maybe a little more variety, but that's tough.
Yeah.
When you get really specific, it's tough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
We'll just go with that.
Okay. We have a prepared question and a virtual audience question that are very similar.
Okay.
Which bird hovers like a helicopter above its prey?
This one.
I would be concerned if Monty did that.
That would be terrifying.
I don't think I know of an owl that hovers.
Yeah.
Not like that.
All right, another audience question. Which bird has more personality?
Ooh. That's like asking which kid is your favorite.
Well, which kid is your favorite?
Oh.
All right, I had a hunch there'd be a differing of opinions here. So, Brandon, Why was your answer Monty?
Because it's Monty.
Clearly.
I don't know, she is just got such a, we perceive such an attitude about her, and every time that we go and work with her, and she's just, I think, more fun to work with. Salem, he's an awesome bird. He's always on the go, but I like a little more laid back of a bird, so I guess it's more of a personal opinion, but.
And I was going to say, you know, as you can see with Salem, you never know what you're going to get. So he keeps you on your toes. He keeps you wondering, you know, I'm sitting here wondering, what am I doing that's making him antsy? And I know it's nothing in particular. It's just that he's, you know. And Monty, 99% of the time, is Monty, which there's nothing wrong with that. And on some days, that's exactly what you want. But some days, you just want a little more excitement, a little more spice. And I guess you're the spicy one.
All right. So Landon, from Mrs. Hinckley's second grade class, wants to know what animals do each bird eat?
Brandon, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. Monty is not that particular as an eastern screech-owl. She's going to eat all kinds of mice and voles and little tiny rodents, a wide variety of amphibians, reptiles, small songbirds, and even crawdads and fish as well. So there's really not much on the smaller scale that she'll say no to.
And it helps to point out, the eastern screech owl has the most varied diet of any owl in North America. So they have the biggest menu. And kestrels, even though they eat lots of different things, they tend to specialize a little more. So out on those farmlands, they eat lots and lots and lots of bugs. Grasshoppers, crickets, beetles, dragonflies, those kinds of things. But to feed their babies and to make sure their babies get enough nutrition and grow up, they're going to eat lots and lots of mice, some little voles, maybe some lizards and snakes, and occasionally a bird. But not quite the variety that the screech owl has.
Excellent. Let's see. Another audience question. Which bird enjoys being in front of an audience more?
It's hard to say, but
Okay. Agreement.
I think on a normal day, yeah. When Salem's somewhere where he's comfortable and he's used to being, he's a totally different bird than he is right now. He'll sit and he'll watch things and be comfortable. Monty, I don't think she minds, but owls, you know, she's out during the day when she doesn't want to be awake, and so I think it's like waking me up in the morning and trying to get me to do something at 6.
Excellent. Well, who is the better nest builder?
Oh. I was like, oh, yeah, wait, oh.
because they're both cavity nesters.
Yeah, and neither of them really build a nest, so. Yeah, so I was like, oh, wait, no. Yeah, neither of them actually.
Well, okay. So technically, going back to our earlier question, I would say Monty is as an eastern screech owl, because they're actually there's papers, scientific papers written about the blind snakes that they bring back to the nest that they help to eat the parasites that might be building up in there.
So, yeah, definitely a better nest tender.
Oh, tender, but actually it's not building it though.
Yeah.
Ah.
So, yeah, that one's kind of hard to answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Who is the pickiest eater?
Ooh, no.
If we're going individual here, not species. Guessing?
Do you have an answer?
I'm thinking.
Oh, there's an agreement. Yes.
Okay, I would think Monty's a little
Mostly
pickier.
because Monty doesn't like chicks.
Or quail.
Or quail, yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't like birds.
Yeah, and Salem does.
Let's see. Whose talons grow the fastest? All right. Agreement.
Yeah, we have to trim his more often.
Which bird has the advantage of stealth while hunting? Oh, and what is that stealth?
Silent flight, camouflage, great hearing. No, that's not really. That's kind of stealth. And good eyesight in low light conditions.
All right. Macy from Mrs. Hinckley's second grade class wants to know how you know if they're boys or girls.
A lot of the times we don't know. So with the raptors, hawks and eagles and falcons and owls and vultures, there's usually not a color difference that makes it very obvious. And they don't have parts on the outside that tell us which is a boy and which is a girl. So we know that Salem is a boy because the kestrels actually do have a different color. The males are more colorful than the females, like you would see in songbirds or in waterfowl. But with screech owls, bald eagles, most of the hawks, there's no color difference. So when you can't have a color difference, the next best way to go is to look at their size. And so with the raptors again, the females are bigger than the males. So because Monte weighs more, she's on the higher end of an average size, we're pretty sure, but we're not positive that she's a girl. So that's about the only way. I mean, we could take some blood and send off a DNA sample, but we don't care enough to know that for sure. But a lot of times, just at a look at one bird, you can't tell.
Excellent. I should have asked this question at the very beginning. Who can sit still the longest?
I should have just pointed to my bird. He can if he wants to. But...
Okay, so which one is more likely to plot a world takeover? Well, that was very quick and unanimous.
It just seems like an owl thing.
Even as we speak, she's plotting it.
You know, we kind of have Pinky in the brain here today in their actions. Okay.
Well, here's a complete personal opinion question.
Okay.
Who is the prettiest? Oh, an agreement on that one.
Oh, I won't tell
But
you.
not by much.
Who is more likely to survive an apocalypse? Oh, why do you say that, Melissa?
I think it would be Salem because he would have this sense to try to escape as things approached, whereas I think Monte, Owl's defense usually is to stay hidden, and so depending on what kind of apocalypse, I think it would hit her, and he would be more flighty, and he would leave.
I would imagine Monte surviving better because I just imagine a bunch of kestrels panicking in the open. And the owls are just kind of sitting there like, are they freaking out? And stay hidden from whatever's there. But I can see that side too.
Yeah, I can see both.
All right, Chevelle would like to know, what is their favorite food?
I think both of them is mice. I think they both love mice the most.
Or very small rats, but mice especially.
Which bird species is experiencing more of a population decline? Why is that?
We don't know, unfortunately. Kestrels used to be the most abundant raptor across pretty much all of North America, and in the last couple of decades, their numbers have been dropping, and we don't know why. But there's a research effort going on right now, a lot of citizen science work to find out, because we can't fix the problem until we know what's going on. So, but unfortunately, kestrel populations are going down.
All right. Jordan wants to know, who is better trained?
Us?
Yeah. It depends on the day.
Yeah. I think they're equally trained.
See, and I would lean more towards Salem just because he's had more time with us. But that's the way I was thinking. But
Well, he definitely has fallen out of his training faster with
true.
less work in this pandemic time.
Yeah.
So, that's a hard one. Yeah,
Stump the experts.
I know, and I'm just going to take all the blame myself on why they're not trained better.
All right, Landon has another question. Landon wants to know, how do they hunt? Yeah.
So kestrels, they're sight hunters. So what they often do is get a high vantage point. So they're either hovering like a helicopter, like we talked about earlier, or they're sitting up on top of a tall wire, and they watch for movement in the ground below, and then when they spot something they want to catch, they just drop down and pounce on it. So that's typically how kestrels will hunt.
Owls are more hunting by sound. They can use their eyesight, obviously, but they're going to be perched, most owls, not all of them, they're going to be perched in a nice high spot, similar to a kestrel, but they're listening especially for any sign of their prey, and they're going to wait for it to come close to them before they're going to fly down with that silent flight and then get all of them if you got your dinner there.
Excellent. So, which bird has calls that sound a bit like a horse's whinny or a dog barking?
It's the cutest sound.
Well, opposite of cute, who is the most ferocious? Oh, disagreement.
I say the kestrel because of what they eat and how often they have to go after it. So a kestrel will, I think, catch more often. They might take smaller things, so I think he has to be just ferocious in his hunting and very determined and very successful to feed himself, the female, and 4 to 6 babies. So I think that's how I'm looking at the ferocious. I mean, he's actually kind of a sweetheart, but when it comes to hunting.
I would say Monte is, just because, I mean, fortunately she doesn't do this very often with us, but owls in the wild, their defensive behaviors, they get very big, they put their wings out to their side, and they puff up and they hiss if they're cornered. So a kestrel is more likely, in my opinion, to fly away and avoid a predator, versus if you really get stuck in a hard spot like an owl, you will puff up and actually defend yourself.
That's a good one.
Interesting. Excellent. So a fact question. We had a question about who flies the fastest, but Chevelle in Mrs. Hinckley's second grade class wants to know, how fast do they fly?
It can be hard to get a number on these two species because they're not going at incredible speeds, either one of these guys. So owls in general, you see reports of them flying maybe 30 miles an hour from point A to point B. Falcons tend to be the fastest animals in the world. Kestrels, not so much, because their bodies are smaller, they don't have the weight to be able to go really fast, and they hunt differently. So a kestrel, now I'm trying to remember, I know I've read it. I want to say average flight between point A to point B is probably about 35 to 40 miles an hour, but
It sounds familiar.
I was going to say, I'm not 100% sure on that because I haven't looked at that one in a while. But they're not going to reach the 70, 100 mile an hour, 200 mile an hour speeds of the big falcons.
Excellent. So Deegan would like to know, which bird flies more? Excellent. And Oakley would like to know, who lives the longest?
They're very similar in lifespan in the wild that we know of, but I would expect. So do you have an answer?
I think a screech has
You agree?
a longer banded recording.
Yeah.
So when they do banding studies, they'll put a band on a bird's leg when they're in the nest, and then if they find them after they've died, they'll know exactly how old that bird was. And I can't remember for sure, but I think a screech-owl has had a longer recorded. But yeah, like Brandon said, they're about the same on average.
Which is about how long?
About 3 to 5 years in the wild, into their teens. I've actually, no, this is, I have heard some people say that a kestrel, actually, the last kestrel I worked with supposedly just turned 21. So now maybe I need to change my answer.
We'll go back and reread that.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. Who has the most natural predators? Oh, agreement. So what are some of their natural predators?
Well, basically anybody that's in the sky that's bigger than them. So an eastern screech-owl would be a predator of an American kestrel. A great horned owl, the red-tailed hawks. But they also are going to be vulnerable to domestic cats and dogs out in those fields, foxes, and now I'm just drawing them like coyotes. Yeah, they do have a lot. I mean, both of them, because of their size, they have a lot of predators. But I think the owl's camouflage helps them so much with that.
And I also think time of day when they're most active.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have a lot more predators out during the daytime versus in the nighttime when she's going to be out. So that would have a factor in it as well, I think.
Yeah.
So Chevelle in Mrs. Brinkley's class wants to know how many eggs can they lay at a time. So I'm going to rephrase that. Who lays the most eggs at a time?
It's the same, isn't it?
It's close,
No cheating.
but I think it's the kestrel though, because don't they do 4
4 to 6 for a kestrel. I was thinking it was 4 to 6 for a...
And I'm just thinking like 4 tops for these guys, but I might be wrong. I have to reread that again.
Can you tell we haven't done a program in a while?
Yeah, we're out of practice.
But yeah, kestrels for sure are 4 to 6 typically. You know what? I'm gonna go with kestrel. Well, this is at a time. But the cool thing though, kestrels, if it's a really good year and there's lots and lots of food and they have a safe place, they may actually have 2 clutches, so 2 sets of eggs in one summer, which is rare in raptors.
Excellent. Another question from our online viewers. Who mates for life?
You knew right off the bat, didn't you? Or you didn't. I don't know on that one. I mean, because generally most raptors, we say they mate for life.
And and that used to be one that I was always so confident in.
Yeah, now there's more and more research that says that's not entirely
Yeah,
true.
the more studies coming out of especially peregrine research says that we used to think they all mated for life until they lost their mate, but now it's like, yeah, you know what? Not so much. So it can be.
Not sure.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right.
In theory, they both do.
Yeah.
But
All right. So Landon, one of our viewing second graders, has another question. Who is the smartest? Oh, an agreement.
oh,
Well, falcons are more closely related to parrots, and that's a pretty highly intelligent group of critters as well. Owls are pretty smart, but they don't have to have as many smarts as some of those birds because they have all these rad skills and adaptations.
So speaking of smart, which bird might cache its food in the holes of trees for up to 4 days?
Oh gosh.
never heard it that specific.
Yeah. You know on that one?
They both cache.
Yeah, but
I don't know about 4 days.
Who likes it fermented?
How can you not eat a mouse in 4 days?
prefer aged meat.
That's yeah.
I'm not sure on that
Yeah,
one.
I'm not sure about the 4 days.
All right. So
We're gonna get so many
another
I know. We're gonna have to do a lot of reading after this.
I know.
another question from Chevelle in Mrs. Hinckley's second grade class wants to know who starts flying first after they've hatched from an egg. Who starts flying soonest?
Wow. Remember how I said, "Oh, I don't need to know that. I can look that up."
Yeah. Now it's coming back to get you, huh?
All right, so now for Chevelle's actual question. So about how soon do they start flying on their own?
Okay. So now I don't want to throw this out as exact, but the way that I learned both of these guys, because they're small, is it's about 30 days from laying the egg to it hatching, and about another 30-ish until they start trying to fly. I would have to actually pull out a reference book because there's probably a couple days difference between them, and I could be off by a few days, but in general, in my head, it's about 30 for each of these species.
Okay, excellent.
Oh, man.
And here's a request to help me remember. So Deegan would like to know what color the birds are because they can't see them very well. So maybe as soon as we get some the rest of our questions, we can get some close-ups.
Sure.
All right. So help us remember that, Deegan, so that we can show you their colors. Who has the best hearing? All right. So Miles wants to know how they hear.
With their ears.
So tell us more about their ears, Brandon.
So, birds don't have ears like humans do. We have pinna, that little flappy bit of skin that cups the sound and funnels it in towards your ear canal there. But they have holes in the sides of their head. Owls have really amazing hearing because as you look at Monte here, and you'll see here in a little bit when we get a closer view, she has a facial disc, and there's hundreds of little soft feathers that absorb the sound waves and funnel that sound in through feather tracks towards the little ear holes on the sides of that facial disc. And so she can actually tell whether prey is above her, below her, to the left, to the right, and how far. So that's really how she's specifically going to hear. And a lot of times, it'll look like they're doing a funky little dance. You might see an owl where they're kind of bobbing their head and ducking and weaving and looking around like that. I know I've done that before.
I can't even see it, but I know it's funny.
She's looking at me like, I don't do that. But they're trying to get as many different angles as possible to pinpoint and triangulate where that sound originates from.
Excellent. All right, so that is all of the questions we have so far.
Okay.
Do you have any other things you want to share or give a close-up
I
of
think
the
we
birds?
can do a close-up.
Who's going first?
Oh, I'll just get this poor little kid out of the way.
Okay. And then you can go get a break.
Right. And I don't know if anybody can see. I have no idea where the camera is on this. I'm going to have Nathan guide me to make sure that we're getting him in there. So Salem, you can see he actually has this really pretty rusty red color along his back, and he actually has on the back of his neck there and a little cap on the top of his head. But his wings are beautiful, like blue-gray, like a steel color. And what I want to point out, hopefully you guys can see this, if you look at all those little dots on the front of him, when they overlap, they turn into little hearts on occasion. And I can see at least one on this side that looks like a little heart there to show off. I'm usually going down his legs. And then underneath, he's showing off for us now. See, he just needed to be closer to his audience. They do have all these really pretty stripes going underneath as well. And just don't look at his tail. Unfortunately, he beats his tail up in the spring. So his tail should be much prettier. It should not be a V shape. And I know I'm going to get comments about that.
We're going to get a little closer here, Monty.
There's
someone behind me. I didn't even know they were there. So you can see Monty is this beautiful gray and dark brown, black striping. She blends in perfectly with the bark of a tree, which is her number one defense mechanism, as she's looking away on something back in the corner there. But they also, eastern screech owls, do come in a red color morph. And is that about 10% of the population?
I think, 10 or 15.
10 to 15% of the population is going to have that reddish color. And she has the more common, that light gray color. You're going to look away from everyone today, huh? oh, they're looking back that way.
She's like a cat.
Oh, there we go. You can see a little bit. There you go. Pretty cool stuff, huh?
So when you got close, since we've got some second graders watching, I could really see a lot of feathers, really tiny feathers around her beak. Can you tell them about those?
Yeah, so owls have some really neat feathers around their beak, and it's a little different than the rest of the raptors because they stick out. Actually, what it really is their positioning of their beak. Owl beaks are pointed more further down versus everyone else, their beak kind of hangs out straight out from their face. And so she has lots of little fluffy feathers that help to muffle sound. Because if they're relying on sound and stealth to try to sneak up on prey and not give away their position, those soft feathers are going to absorb sound waves instead of allowing that sound to bounce off of that hard surface of her beak and give away her position. So and also it has the added bonus, owls don't have that great a vision up close, and so when they get their meal and they fly back to the nest to feed the chicks, they really can't see that well up close, and so they will actually kind of close their eyes and nuzzle until they can feel the beaks of the chicks that are waiting for that food, and then they'll open their mouth and drop that little tidbit in for them to eat. So that's what those little fluffy feathers help out with.
Excellent. So just a few more questions from Mrs. Chevelle's class.
Okay, this is fun.
So they want to know, who is your favorite bird? So maybe talk about, maybe it's not a favorite, but another bird you really like from the raptor experience.
Brandon, are you going to bite the bullet and do that one first, or me?
Yeah, why don't you go for it?
I haven't really made it a secret that I think my favorite bird here is our red-tailed hawk isham. I love all the birds. They're all so different. They're all fun to work with. But I think we all kind of get, there's different categories that we like. And so, like, I'm a big dog person, not a little dog person. Or, you have cat people and not cat people and stuff like that. And when it comes to birds, you get people that are, falcon obsessed, or people that just really love the eagles. And
Or owls.
most of the time we find people that just love owls. And it's interesting that I like owls, but I've never just been obsessed with owls. I think they're cool, but I have always really liked the falcons and the hawks the most of all of them. And Isham, our red-tailed hawk, there's just something about him that he, when you get him on your glove, he kind of puts you at ease, and he's just mellow. And I think the fact too that he has such a visual problem, he doesn't see very well at all. And I think part of it is the fact that he trusts me and us to look after him and keep him safe. I think to me that means a lot. So I think that's probably why I'm most drawn to Isham. But I do love every one of the birds that we have here with us. I love every bird that I've ever worked with, and over 20 years, that's probably, I think I'm over 40 raptors and a bunch of parrots. But yeah.
Yeah, my favorite, or one of my favorites, is Suli, our turkey vulture. She's our only human imprint, so she was raised by people. She doesn't know that she's a bird, so she doesn't have any idea what normal is. But she's always a blast to work with, and always fun to talk to people about, and the importance of vultures to the ecosystem, because they get such a bad reputation. And it's a lot of fun to actually share how important that vultures really are to help us out.
Excellent. So thinking of all of our birds of prey in the raptor experience, Mrs. Hinckley's class wants to know, who is the smallest?
Of the birds that we have, Remington, our northern saw-whet owl, is the smallest.
Who's actually smaller than Monte.
Yeah. So we mentioned earlier, Monte weighs about 185-ish grams, and Remington, I think last time, was 78 grams.
Yep.
So he is not quite the size of a robin. Salem here is about the same size as a robin, and Remington's probably, his head would come up to the middle of Salem's chest is all. So he's not the smallest owl species even in North America, but he's the smallest one that we have.
Excellent.
All right, so I think that covers everybody's questions. This was so much fun, you guys.
Maybe in the future we can come up with another version of it, or
Yeah.
something similar that we could do this again.
Yeah,
This was a lot of fun.
definitely. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Mrs. Hinckley's class, for making it happen. And we'll try to do this again because this was really fun. We'll pick a couple different birds next time. But otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope you have a